There are a couple of lessons. I mean, the lessons of Europe are the same as the lessons of Sacramento, which is the same as the lesson of Albany, which is the same as the lesson of Trenton, which will presently be the same as the lesson of Washington. The first is if you have a big government, big union, big bureaucracy model in which politicians consistently promise more than they can pay for, you do one morning run into a brick wall. The Greeks have now collided with that brick wall, and because nobody's prepared to tell them the truth, they're in a state of total confusion, and so they're going to handle the pain very badly. And the rest of Europe is desperately trying to figure out a way to prop up the system. And if you'll notice, the projected cost of it has gone up, I think, by a factor of 10 since the conversation started in 6 weeks. And, you know, there's no reason to believe that $1 trillion is the right number. There's no reason to believe anybody knows what the right number is. Because if you watch, everybody has this underlying belief that Germany is strong. Well, I don't know if that's true. I don't know that when you get done with this whole economic, recognizing how much the German banks have invested in the Mediterranean, I'm not at all sure that the German economy won't be equally a basket case by the time we're done with this. It's a very high-priced economy, and it's an economy which has historically sustained its markets by allowing them to overspend so they'll buy from it. And now it's finding out that it now has to prop up all the people that it was happy having buying from it, so that, you know, the person in Greece who was buying the BMW or the Mercedes or the Volkswagen now doesn't want to pay back the money they borrowed from the German bank in order to be able to buy the German product. And this is going to lead to, nobody understands all the permutations, but one of the reasons I believe in markets is nobody, unlike Paulson, who actually thought he was running the world, I don't think human beings have a very high capacity for understanding this stuff. I think very often you have to observe it after it occurs and then write a book on it. But your ability to predict it's very limited. I think we also don't understand what the impact's going to be here. Because you have almost certainly a substantial decline in European demand. You're almost certainly going to get a radical decline in the euro. And we don't know how that all then works its way out in terms of what happens in the United States.
Speaking of Trenton, how important is what Chris Christie is up to at the moment?
I think at the moment he's the most important governor in the United States because he has one of the most difficult states to govern. He has understood the scale of power the New Jersey governorship has. And he has a personality which allows him to be in the middle of a long fight and not mind it. And that allows him to actually, I think, get some relish out of the experience he's living through right now. And he has a pretty good grip on the basic essentials. You know, don't prop up sick institutions, don't prop up inefficient bureaucracies, don't prop up interest groups that represent the past, and don't raise taxes on the people who create jobs. And to the best of, I haven't seen any recent polling, but to the best of my knowledge, he's actually doing pretty well with the people of New Jersey, who are concluding, not that it's desirable, but that it's unavoidable. So I think it's a very important model for New York and for Chicago, for California, and for other states. I mean, and I think what you don't know is when he gets down through the first couple of layers, can we find enough new solutions to solve the problems at deeper layers?
If we can't, are states like California too big to fail?
No.
Do you think the federal government will not necessarily have to?
Well, do I think liberal politicians may try to bail out liberal interest groups by taking your money and sending it to the states? That's a different question. Are they too big? No. I mean, first of all, I don't think California will fail. California is not nearly in as much trouble as Greece is. I mean, the much smaller share of the state GDP is in debt. California's problem is that Sacramento is totally dysfunctional because it is owned by the interest groups. I mean, I think one of the core themes that resonates with people is that Lincoln was right, and we want government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It means we don't want government of the bureaucracies or government of the judges or government of the politicians. And California is, to me, the first two places that got me thinking about all this were watching Sacramento and watching Albany and seeing them 10 years ago as forerunners of Washington. These are interest group owned cities that are imperial parasites on their state.
Yeah, Yeah, during the Revolution, we were very upset that the British shut down the New York legislature. Now everyone would consider it a relief.
But there was a belief in the old days that the legislature represented the people, whereas people nowadays realize the legislature represents the interest groups. I think that's a big problem, and I think that leads to really deep conflict.
When things were at their worst, and who's to say they were at their worst, but certainly at the peak of the worry about Sacramento and Albany, people were talking about constitutional conventions, state constitutional conventions in those states. Do you think that's a realistic possibility or a desirable one?
Well, I think it's circular. In order to have a successful constitutional convention, you have to organize a grassroots movement big enough to win the elections to the delegates to the convention and not have the convention stolen by the interest groups.
Right.
If you develop a grassroots movement big enough to do that, you can probably beat the interest groups in the next election. And then you won't need the constitutional convention because you'll have a governor and a legislature that will simply change the rules of the game. And I think it's circular. I mean, if you're not strong enough to beat the legislature, you probably be very careful about having a constitutional convention because you're likely to have the interest groups dominate the convention and make it even worse.
Tomorrow's a big primary day, Mr. Speaker. You have Grayson and Paul in Kentucky, and you also have Specter maybe losing in Pennsylvania. What are you looking for when you watch tomorrow?
Well, the two places I'm looking are Tim Burns in the special election in western Pennsylvania. Because if he wins that, and it looks right now like he probably will, but you don't know until it's over. If he wins that, it's a very good signal, particularly because I think on Saturday we'll win in Hawaii with Charles DeJoux. And if we win both those seats, I think that's a very helpful psychological signal. So I'm watching that one. I'm watching the Pennsylvania Senate primary with some hope that the senator loses, because I frankly did one of his last Republican fundraisers, and I've always resented the fact that he didn't send the money back. And I've always thought that there was something that's fundamentally wrong, just as with Chris in Florida. I mean, these guys who raise all this money and then out of personal ambition change the rules of the contract, I think ought to send the money back. I think it's just fundamentally wrong. And so I favor anybody but Specter. I think Toomey will win the seat in the end, but I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Specter lose. I don't know the situation in Kentucky well enough, although the polling data seems pretty increasingly one-sided. The other race I've got that I'm intrigued with is personal, and that is that one of our former employees, Princella Smith, is running in Arkansas, and I think has a shot at winning the Republican nomination, and if she does, she'll probably win the general election. And to have an aggressive, intelligent African-American conservative woman would be very, very helpful to the Republican Party's future.
Great. Well, the book is To Save America. Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House. We thank you for coming to National Review.
Glad to be here.